Hello everyone, welcome to this session. Our chapter is transportation of materials in living things. I started this chapter in a previous video. We saw its concept and we also discussed its various importance. So today let's move on to the other subtopic whereby we'll be discussing the osmosis, diffusion, and the mass flow. So these are the things which we're going to cover in this chapter. I mean, this video. So I hope they'll be very clear. So let's dive into it. The meaning of osmosis, diffusion, and the mass flow. So we'll start with the meaning of all these three: osmosis, diffusion, and mass flow. So these are the ones which we'll be dealing with in this video. So life processes, we know that various life processes in organisms, they take place at the cell level. Now, when they take place at the cell level, it is very likely necessary for the substances to move in and out of the cell. So the various substances have to move in or out of the cell due to these various life processes that organisms they have to help them at the cell level. Now, therefore, there are two ways through which substances they can move across the membrane. The membrane, this is the like the outer cover of the cell. So there are two major ways through which these various substances that are required for the various processes in the cell they can come across the membrane. The materials in the living organisms they simply move by these kinds of uh, system or these kinds of processes. There is diffusion, there is osmosis, and the mass flow. So the various materials that the living organisms requires, or they are just needed to be moved out of the cells specifically, they are moved by these processes: the diffusion, osmosis, and mass flow. So we'll be discussing each one of them. So there, that's why there's a title, the meaning of the osmosis, diffusion, and the mass flow. So let's start with the first one, that is the diffusion. Diffusion, this is the movement of the materials from the region of higher concentration to a region of low concentration until equilibrium of the two sides is maintained. So this is the definition of this kind of process. This is just the movement of the materials carried out within a region of higher concentration to that region of low concentration until a certain equilibrium state occurs between the two sides. You are talking about the first region that had the higher concentration to the other region that had lower concentration. Now, diffusion can also be defined as the movement of the ions or molecules from the region of high concentration to the region of low concentration without involving any permeable membrane. So this is the definition. So in diffusion, there isn't involvement of this uh, permeable membrane. So that's what it is, the diffusion. Now, the difference in concentration of a substance between regions is known as the concentration gradient. So when you're required to maybe define what is the concentration gradient, this concentration gradient, this is simply the difference in the concentration of the substances between the two regions. Here talking about maybe the region that has high concentration and the one that has low concentration. Materials are transported in the body systems of living things from area where there are abundant to areas where there are less abundant, and this process or mechanism of the transportation in these animals is termed as diffusion. So that's how diffusion occurs in organisms. So materials that are required, or yes, the ones that are needed for the body are the ones that are transported in the body system of living things, just from area where they are abundant. Here, talking about maybe from the environment to areas where they are less abundant, and this here talking about to the body. Now, where in this process or mechanism of transportation is what we call the diffusion in the human body. Diffusion occurs in exchange of the gases like the oxygen, the carbon dioxide during the respiration in the animals and the plants. So that's how diffusion it occurs in living things. Also, diffusion takes place during the distribution of the nutrients and the digested foods in the living organisms. So that's also how the diffusion takes place. So these are just the examples of where this diffusion can take place within these living things. Now let's move on to the osmosis. This is the other process that occurs for the transportation of materials. Osmosis, this is the movement of water molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So when you're talking about osmosis, there's simply the movement of these water molecules whereby they move from the region of higher concentration to a region of low concentrations through this semi-permeable membrane. So that's what is the definition of the osmosis. The partial permeable membrane, this is the membrane that it allows the small particles such as the water molecules just to pass through it, and but not larger particles such as the sugar molecules and ions from the source. So that's what it is, the permeable membrane. That's what it is. Now, examples of the semi-permeable membranes are the ones like the cell membranes and the pig's bladder. So these are just some of the examples of the semi-permeable membrane. Now, these membranes, they simply allow transportation of water through them. So they are the ones that allow the carrying of water through them. In spite of the fact that they allow transportation of water through them, they do not permit the passage of sugar or salt molecules because they are solutes. So this is what it is in terms of how it occurs in the osmosis process. So in osmosis process, there is transportation of water through the membranes, just in not allowing the other solutes you are talking about, maybe sugar or salt molecules. Osmosis, it occurs when water moves down its concentration gradient across the semi-permeable membrane. So that's osmosis. Therefore, the osmosis to take place, there must be some kind of factors or situations. The first one that the two solutions with the different concentrations, they have to be there, and the a partial permeable membrane to separate them. So these are just the requirements of the osmosis to take place. A dilute solution has higher water concentration, while a concentrated solution it has a lower water concentration. So that has to be noted when we're talking about the solutions in osmosis process. For example, when salt is dissolved in water, now when salt dissolved in water, a little dissolved salt produces a dilute solution with a high water concentration. A lot of dissolved salt produces a concentrated solution with a lower water concentration. Now, here's just the diagram of the osmosis process. So here, as you can see, there are two sides or two regions separated by this selectively permeable membrane. Termed as selective, meaning that it's some stuff to go through the regions. So here there's low sugar concentration place where also there's high water concentration, and here there's high sugar concentration and the low water concentration. So the process of osmosis it occurs, and you can see by labeled here that uh, these small cycles, the blue ones are the ones that are water, and the other ones that are bigger ones are the sugar ones. So I represented like that. So here is how this selective permeable membrane it separates the movement. So as you can see, these particles they cannot come across to this other side. Hope that's clear. Now let's move on to the other process of transportation, that is mass flow. The diffusion and the osmosis they occur very slowly and cover short distances. So they are very short distance. These two, diffusion and osmosis. Now in animals and plants, the materials are usually transported along a distance and in large quantities. Now, for example, the food nutrients are from the small intestine has to be moved to cells in the extremities, such as the toes and the fingers where the nutrient materials have to be transported to a long distance. Now, due to that, therefore, efficient and passive mechanism is just mostly required to facilitate these kinds of movement. Now, that is when mass flow comes in. So that's when mass flow is used. So mass flow is generally for the long distance movement of the materials. Mass flow is the movement of the materials in large quantities and across a long distance in the body of an organism due to the differences in pressure between the two regions. So in mass flow, it based on the difference in pressure between the two regions, and it requires the movement of materials in larger quantities for across a long distance. Materials in higher concentration, take an example, in plants and animals are moved by the process of the mass flow. So that's how mass flow is very much likely used in the plants and animals. Now, for example, the manufactured food in plant leaves has to be moved to all plant parts. All all plant parts for use or storage by mass flow. Uh, and that's example of the mass flow. So that's all I have for this session. I hope that's clear. We've discussed the transportation of materials in living things. We've seen that there are three processes that are necessary for the transportation. We've seen that there's diffusion, there's osmosis, and there's mass flow. We've discussed their meanings and how they occur. I hope that's all clear. And thank you.